No shame.
I'm great with the titles, and I'm sure I'll have another amazing one for this video that I won't know until I wake up in the morning and see it posted. This game, man, it was when we talked during the preview. I told you I was kind of like on the fence. I figured there'd be more to learn with both teams, and we learned, right? Like I told you with your score prediction, I was like, man, I think if Indiana gets into the 20s, Nebraska loses this game. Well, they went ahead and did that by halftime. So it was, which the game was over by halftime. Of course, there's going to be the back and forth, like what went wrong, what's to blame. Every single thing was bad from a competitive standpoint. And we talked just a little bit before we started this. I know that Husker fans aren't big on patience, right? We want things the way they were and we want them right now. But this game shows you the reality of a rebuild process. And there's going to be all kinds of comparisons to like, well, this coach did this at this program, Coach Sig's doing this at Indiana. All of that shit is fine, but we're not those teams. It's kind of like, you and I are applying for the same job, and this ties into something else that's currently going on. But you and I in the interviews just want to tell the HR person what's wrong with the other person, right? Instead of saying this is why you should hire me. So I think one of the worst things we do as fans is we go, why can't we do what that team did? Or why can't we have a coach like that coach had, or get the players this team gets? Every place, every situation, all those things are different. And maybe there is a magical fit of coach, timing, recruit, and things like that that happens, or transfer class or something like that. But that's not where we're at, man. This is at least 3 year, if you look at Matt Rule's track record, rebuild, mainly through recruiting and developing players. And you're not going to get the quick overnight success that you're going to get from some of these schools that are going heavily in the portal, especially when you have a good fit like he had, where a lot of who he's recruiting are guys he coached previously, or at least have a lot of years, playing and have a chip on their shoulder, and they're eager to get to a higher level conference and team and show that, they were under recruited or whatnot coming out. But all of that to say, I don't care how much we go back and watch film, which I'll go watch the game again, because I hate watching it the way we watch it, but they're just better. Like their players are better. They get into rhythm on offense better. They don't make the mistakes that Nebraska makes, especially a lot of the freshmen and younger guys. And I think also when you talk about that patience virtue, I think everybody assumes, and rightfully so, that Dylan Raiola is going to be a very, very good quarterback. Better than Rourke, better than Altmaier, better than most of the quarterbacks we're going to face. But right now, in stress and pressure situations in games, he's just not. And that's not a knock on him. The dude's a 19-year-old true freshman that got thrown onto a bad team that is trying to get better. And the same thing with guys like Ja'Cory Barney and other positions, where you're still trying to develop guys, but you have this idea from a lot of people that they're already the max, like they're already at their ceiling. And it's like, well, how come this worked on their offense, but not ours? Because you guys haven't peaked out yet. These guys are all seasoned vets as far as college football goes, that are in a system they're pretty familiar with, and it's not as much of a development or transition process for them. And then you mix it in with, you still have a lot of guys on this roster that have only lost. And it's not a knock on them. It's just, you can knock on the previous coaches. You can knock on the guys if you want, whatever the reason is. This isn't the finished product, but people want the finished product results. And I think that adds to the emotions, especially in an ass whooping like that, where it's like, man, we're nowhere near where I thought we were. Maybe, but also look at some of the close games, or instead of being mad that you won some close games and you think you should have blown out a team like Purdue or Rutgers, previous teams would have lost those games. You know what I'm saying? And like you still have a squad that has a bunch of newcomers and a lot of the old pieces that only knew losing, a way to start winning some games. And it's just, you just hope it keeps progressing in the right direction, man. I mean, I don't know what else you could look at that game and think it is wrong. And now you can get into the whole coaching aspect. I know a lot of people have opinions on Satterfield, on Foley. People were talking about Rule a lot during that stream. Let's get a couple classes in here and let some of these higher projected guys get developed, and then see what happens with them, instead of expecting guys to walk in day one and be, Heisman candidates.
When it comes to impatience from the fans, I don't see it as completely unreasonable being impatient, because there was a period in time where they were being patient. I think they're just getting sick of always being told to be patient. I think that's what's upsetting people, not just like, I'm impatient because I'm from Nebraska. It's like, how many more years am I going to have to be impatient? And I've heard we're almost there so many times. It just, at some point, you hit your wall with how much of that you can listen to. This will be a unpopular opinion with a lot of people, but you and I feel that Nebraska is still on the right track. How do you explain that to someone who's heartbroken right now after this loss?
To be honest, you kind of can't. It's one of those things that they're going to have to be shown, or we're going to have to be shown wrong. You know what I mean? Like, just because we think it or we come on a video and say something doesn't mean it's right. And I'm not at all saying people shouldn't be impatient or they shouldn't feel what they feel, think what they think, say what they say. That's not my spot. I'm just telling you what I think, and I'm responding to it. But to respond kind of what you're saying of like, how long do we have to be patient? A lot of those people that are going to say that are already talking about getting Rule out of here. So if you want to change over a head coach every 3 or 4 years, you have to reset your patience time period. I always ask multiple questions, but the big question I always ask when somebody wants a coach gone, it's like, okay, for who or what type? What is it about him that you want gone, or what is he lacking you want in? The second thing is you have to reset your patient's timeline every time you bring in a new coach, because he's going to bring in a new system that needs to be learned. He's going to bring in some transfer guys. He's going to want to recruit to his system and his style. So saying, hey, we've been being patient since the Riley era doesn't have an effect on Scott Frost. And saying we've been patient since the Riley era or the Scott Frost era doesn't have an effect on Matt Rule. Matt Rule's been here a year and a half. What he's doing starts when he gets here, not when you started exercising patience against Riley or Frost, or when I started exercising, whatever. Like, I don't mean for this to come off like attacking somebody, but it's like, you have to look at all sides of things when it's like, get this guy out of here and get me this guy, or bench this dude and put him in. Like, there's collateral damage to everything. Sure, there might be perks to things, but there's also downsides to things. And it's like, is the bad going to outweigh the good? And I don't think that people who want Rule gone, or who are going to get to that point after we get our asses beat next week, and especially if we don't look great against like UCLA or USC or something like that, like the more that talk heats up, you have to keep in mind, if you want him gone because you're tired of waiting for us to be good, and this is a better product we've seen on the field than we have in years, even though you got drugged by a team that's way better than you got outcoached, outclassed, everything from a competitive level that was at stake, you lost. Nebraska lost today, right? There wasn't one area that they outdid Indiana, but it's like, that's part of, unfortunately, the process of going, especially at the slow burn that Rule tends to do things, since he goes through the draft or through recruiting and developing players and things like that. You're not going to get a guy that walks in and puts up Heisman numbers typically. I mean, if you do, thank God. But to answer your full question though, I don't think there's anything you say to somebody that makes them go, oh yeah, you're right, I'll just be patient, especially after you know what's coming next week. Patience is going to wear even thinner, and I get it. I fully do. Like, I'm not trying to ridicule people, but it's just, that's where I'm at, man. I'm well aware that we didn't go from the longest bowl drought in school history, but that currently exists in college football, to overnight we're going to be in the college playoff or compete for the Big Ten title. Like, there's going to be steps, plural, along the way. It's not from worst to first. It's going to be a slow burn to get there. And it's like, it sucks for me too, man. I mean, I'd love to come out and just drub a lot of these teams and have more to be hyped about, but unfortunately that's the way it is. So just, you got to ride it out or see what the dude's doing. If Rule would have said when he came in, or had a track record of, yeah, next year at this time, I'm bringing in the guys, I'm bringing Louis bags, or I've got guys from James Madison that I'm bringing with me that know my system, that are 4 and 5 year seniors, and we got this result. Yeah, then you can be like, what happened, dude? You promised us this. Like, his track record was proven. He said many times, we're going to rebuild this thing from the ground up through basically recruiting. We'll fill in good players here and there when we can or as needed. But it's just, you're halfway through the second season, man. It's going to take a little time, unfortunately.